There's one man whose name is synonymous with global climate change and who's also been recognized for all his efforts. That man would be Al Gore. The former U.S. Vice President is also a Nobel Peace Prize winner, an Academy Award winner, an Emmy winner, and a Grammy winner. He campaigned Monday at the United Nations Climate Summit in New York, urging both world leaders and millennials to combat climate change. Now, recently, I caught up for an exclusive interview with former U.S. Vice President Al Gore, and I started off by asking him if he was pleased by all the efforts that China has been making to combat climate change.
Well, I think the answer to that question is yes. But in the U.S., as in China, there is a struggle between people who understand why this must be done and who are pushing in Beijing, for example, for stronger laws and policies that will help reduce the global warming pollution and seize the exciting new opportunities to build a 21st century economy. But there are others, some in the regions of China where some of the polluters are well entrenched, and some of the regional leaders, not for me to say, but I'm trying to give you a candid answer. Remember the old phrase, the mountain is high and the emperor is far away. But the emperor's not so far away in the age of digital media, and the people, both in China and in the United States and all over the world, are strengthening the hand of those policy makers who want to do the right thing.
I want to bring your attention to another country, Australia. Recently, Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott repealed the carbon tax. I lived in Australia for a number of years. The carbon tax has always been a very contentious issue. Do you think that this decision by the current government to axe the tax is regrettable?
Oh, yes, it's regrettable. However, there is now a struggle inside Australia that advocates for solving the climate crisis are winning right now to prevent Prime Minister Abbott from eliminating the subsidies for the rapid expansion of solar and wind and efficiency technologies. Australia pays attention to what China does, and the new restrictions on coal burning in China will actually diminish the markets for the kind of coal that Australia is selling. So the game is not over in Australia. And actually, I'm not a political pollster, but I haven't been able to help noticing the fact that Prime Minister Abbott's popularity has fallen dramatically in the wake of these steps he's taken. I'm sure there are other factors as well. But the forces in Australia who want progress on solving the climate crisis are gaining ground rapidly.
Former Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson recently wrote an op-ed in the New York Times, and he said that the United States should price carbon and should also have carbon tax laws. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I first proposed this 25 years ago. I have advocated this step for a long time. And I was very pleased when Hank Paulson wrote his piece in the New York Times, and when another former Treasury Secretary, Bob Rubin, wrote a similar piece in the Washington Post. And the two of them have been joined by a group of bipartisan business and finance leaders who have come to the same conclusion. If you want less of something, then that's where some tax revenue can come from and should. But then you can decide to give that back to the people in other ways so that they are getting the right signal in the marketplace. Presently, the world is subsidizing the burning of these dirty carbon fuels to the tune of almost $2 trillion per year. It's really not a sign of good mental health in the world. So we should stop that, and we should discourage it instead by getting tax revenue from the discouragement of these poisonous fuels, and then reducing taxes elsewhere in order to encourage people to make the economy stronger and also to create the jobs that are in abundance when we invest in solar and wind and renewable technologies.
You last year wrote the book, The Future, 6 Drivers of Global Change. Lots of fascinating paragraphs in this book. One in particular caught my eye. If I can quote you, you said on page 282, "The more energy we produce from solar and wind, the cheaper it gets. The more energy we get from oil and coal, the more expensive it gets. And of course, the fuel for solar and wind is effectively limitless. For example, more potentially usable energy is received by the Earth from sunlight each and every hour than would be needed for all of the world's energy consumption in a full year." You go on to say the same for wind. Wind energy also exceeds the world's total energy demand several times over. If the statistics are so staggering, as you point out, why hasn't the United States taken the lead in renewable energy like solar and wind?
Well, it's an excellent question, and candidly, part of the answer is that the wealth and power of the oil and coal companies has been deployed in ways that unfortunately have been persuasive with some of the elected officials, campaign contributions and lobbying. And American democracy is not at present as strong as it has been during some times past. That's beginning to change as the internet empowers people to connect with one another and discuss how to lift up the general good and the public interest. We're seeing a healthy development in our politics. But at the present time, these very powerful polluters have much more political power than they should have. And it has taken some time for the forces of good, as I would describe them, and I believe them to be, to mobilize in order to overcome what these polluters are doing.
That was former U.S. Vice President Al Gore talking to me in an exclusive interview for CCTV.